Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1239B, and today's date is March 27th, 2017, and the title of the episode is The Deep State Places Assets in the Middle East. They are ready to make a move. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we can see more and more information is coming out about how the Obama administration was spying on Trump. We know that Nunes, he has the information, he has the documentation, and we realize that they had the ability to unmask certain individuals, and we know they were being surveilled not for Russia, but for other reasons. And former House Intel Chair Pete Hoekstra was saying that when he was chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, I was routinely involved in briefings as a member of the Gang of Eight, both parties, leaders in the House and Senate, and on intelligence committees. I cannot recall how many times I asked to see the raw intelligence reporting and was refused because that stuff is just not made available to policymakers. But according to Mr. Nunes, such information made its way to the Obama White House before Inauguration Day. Few, if any, people working in the White House would ever need to see raw intelligence. Like intelligence committee members, they are typically consumers of intelligence products, not raw intelligence. The raw transcripts of masked persons or unmasked persons or U.S. persons who can be easily identified making their way to the White House is very likely unprecedented. One can only imagine who at that point might be reading those reports. Valerie Jarrett, Susan Rice, Ben Rhodes, the president. And what he's saying is that it's very strange that they wanted to see this information. Now again, Trey Gowdy was questioning Comey during the hearings, and he asked him how many people have the ability to unmask people. And those individuals that unmask those people and leak the information, that is a crime. And Trey Gowdy was wondering why Comey wasn't investigating a crime. Because he knows exactly who it was. They know exactly what was going on. And we can see the whole thing is a complete cover-up. And what they're most nervous about is the information actually getting to the outside, to the world, showing that the Obama administration, someone in there, maybe it wasn't Obama, maybe it was, actually leaked the information and broke the law and was actually spying on Trump. We already know they were. And we can see that Nunes has damaging information because he called Comey and Rogers in to the White House. And we can see right now they know exactly who it was. Now, John Bolton is out there, and he may be named Deputy Secretary of State, and he is suggesting that the U.S. intelligence community conclusion about Russian hacking that favored Trump, well, this could be a deception, a false flag. Now, it's very interesting that he's using the term false flag. Now, he didn't elaborate on the term false flag. He seemed to be suggesting that someone could have been attempting to falsely lead the public into believing Russia was to blame for the hacking. And it's very interesting for a government official to come out and use the word false flag. And really, that's what it was. Because we know that the CIA had the Umbrage program, which they were able to compile code and make it look like whoever was hacking, they can make it look like it was coming from a certain country. And we know that state operators, they wouldn't leave breadcrumbs. They don't leave information in their code. They don't have the hacking coming from their country, from their own IP addresses. That is just ridiculous. So we can see at this point, the entire story of the Russian hacking, that just went down the drain. That is not even on the front burner anymore. We can see the wiretapping. Well, many are saying that this can be worse than Watergate, because we can see that there's an administration that was actually spying on a presidential candidate and then leaked the information and broke the law. And we can see that something is going on behind the scenes. Now, the European Parliament, they passed a bill this month which closes loopholes in regards to acoustic and deactivated prop guns to make them irreversibly unusable. Now, if the law passes the Council of Ministers, it will also apply stricter regulations on semi-autos with high-capacity magazines. Included in the bill are obligations of member states to monitor the issuance of firearm licenses and share the information across the EU. Countries in the EU will have about 30 months to implement the required procedures for tracking these firearms. Now, what this means is, with so much focus on tracking firearms, it is interesting to note that one of the weapons used in the Paris terror attack may have been acquired through Operation Fast and Furious. And this was supposedly a operation where the ATF purposely leaked guns into the criminal hands for the supposed purpose of tracking them, but they lost track of many of the weapons. Basically, what we can see was happening is they were supplying weapons to many different factions in Mexico, out throughout the world. And we can see right now that everything that they're putting into place, all these gun laws that they say they're going to keep everyone safe, have they worked yet? No, because it has nothing to do with the guns. Look what's happening right now. In these areas where weapons are hard to get, what are the people using? Cars, trucks, knives. And are they killing people? Are they mowing them down? Let's go with the official story that, yes, these are real events and they're actually killing people. So what that means is, if we use the same logic that they have, we need to get rid of all the cars. We need to get rid of all the knives, because those are the objects that are causing these problems. So we can see right now, their whole entire argument that they've been making all this time, well, it's deteriorating. It's falling apart. The gun isn't the problem, because guess what? Mowing down people and knifing people kills almost as many people as a gun. An inanimate object doesn't kill anyone. It is the person behind it. But we know this is not the real reason why they kept pushing gun legislation. The real reason why they're trying to get weapons away from the people. Because to create this one world government that they wanted, which they still want, which they're still trying to get, they need the population stripped of all weapons. Because a population with a weapon, guess what? You can't control them. This is why they tried to pass the UN Arms Treaty in all the countries. I mean, we had John Kerry actually sign it. The Senate wouldn't pass it. And if they did pass it, Obama was going to sign it. He wasn't going to veto it. Which means they were going to try to convince us that all the gun laws went off to the UN. But that didn't happen. But this is what they were trying to do. Because they knew eventually all these countries with all these weapons, they needed to get rid of them. And they started in England, they started in Australia, and many other countries throughout Europe, in Canada. They were pushing their agenda. That's what a lot of these terrorist attacks were, all these false flags. They were trying to do whatever they possibly could to get rid of the weapons. And they're still going to try to do it. It's a little bit harder right now because they have other things to deal with. Because the person that they need in place, well, they're not in place anymore. Trump is in place now. And he's not really going along with their agenda, because if he was, they wouldn't be trying to push him out. They wouldn't be trying to hammer on him so hard. It wouldn't make any sense. Look how they treated Obama. Did the corporate media ever come out and slam him? No, they didn't. Now, Greece has begun to block refugees right now. They were taking on refugees, and they've said they've reached their limit, and they can't take on any more. We're done here. And we're seeing a lot of countries come out and say, we're done here. We cannot accommodate any more refugees. And Greece saying that they don't have the capacity to do it anymore. Now, this is going to be a problem, of course. And we'll have to see how that plays out. Now, in Italy, we can see that Italian officials, they called for an investigation of George Soros and the NGOs that he supports. Now, there was a report that was released by agency Frontex. And they're saying that George Soros and Hillary Clinton, they are involved in human trafficking. They lowered the costs for these human traffickers to get onto their ships. Instead of using the ships from the EU and things like that, traffickers are able to operate with much less risk of arrest by European law enforcement officers if they use these NGO type of ships. And they've been using them, and the Italian officials, they're calling for an investigation of George Soros and Hillary Clinton and the NGOs. And we can see right now that all of this is starting to come to the surface now. about human trafficking, pedophilia, and everything else. I mean, it's starting to really ramp up, and it's starting to spread because, as we know, this is not just localized. We can see that a lot of U.S. officials, there's a lot of arrests going on around the country. A lot of the elites, they're all involved in this. Now, we understand that after the terror attack in England, we knew that this was wrapped around many different agendas, like they always are. We know there's the Brexit. We know that they want more laws to lock down the country. We know this is a scare tactic. And we can see that the British government, the British intelligence agencies, they're doing the same thing that the FBI did. They're making the case of why they need the ability to read encrypted messages, because they're saying that these terrorists, they're using like WhatsApp, they're using other methods, and they're using encryption, and we need to read all of it. Because Khalid Massoud, well, he used WhatsApp, and we weren't able to read his messages. These individuals, if they're truly terrorists, they wouldn't use WhatsApp, Facebook, YouTube, regular texting. They would create their own messaging services to send messages around, and they would encrypt it on their own. This is another play, so they have the ability to read what people are saying. I mean, from WikiLeaks, we understand from Night Skies 1.2 and from Dark Matters, we know that they can access our iPhones, our information, and we understand right now that they have the ability to read what we are doing. When you encrypt it, and you're not using one of their encryption systems where they have the key and the method, well, it makes it very difficult for them to read this information. This is why they continually try to push this case where they want to be able to read everything that everyone is doing. And they use the terrorists to push their agenda. Now, out in Russia, we see that there have been protests, people rioting in Russia right now. And we see already that 80% of Russians want no one else leading them right now except for Putin. And we can see that Soros, CIA, MI6, and many others who are anti-Putin, well, they fund different groups in different countries to create these protests. And it looks like we had one on Sunday in Russia. And Moscow police, well, there were about 8,000 individuals who took part in an unauthorized opposition rally in central Moscow. And more than 100 participants were detained, including Western Alexei Navalny, a phony anti-corruption activist, convicted embezzler, self-serving opportunist, and a convenient Western stooge. And he's likely getting State Department funding through the so-called National Endowment for Democracy for disruptive activities. And we see there are other smaller protests going on, and this is all about pushing their agenda in Russia. And they've tried this before. They tried it in China. They try it in all the different countries. They try to push their agenda, but it just doesn't work. They don't have the ability to create enough of these protesters and riots to get this whole thing off the ground. Just like in the United States, they've been trying with Ferguson, Baltimore. After Trump, the protests, they've been trying to get all these protesters together, but it never got off the ground. And it has failed every single time because the people are not really behind that. You can't create something out of thin air unless the people are actually behind what they're trying to push. And many of the people are really not behind it. We see that the corporate media is out there and they're pushing the idea that North Korea, well, they're threatening to attack the U.S. and South Korea as South Korea and the United States have their military exercises. And they're saying without warning, they're going to strike. Now, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know if it's going to happen, but we know that the United States government central bankers, they've been cyber attacking the missile systems of North Korea. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to redirect one into South Korea to try to get something started. We see already in Afghanistan, well, they're asking for 5,000 more troops to go back into Afghanistan. General John Nicholson, he's already stated that we need 5,000, which really means we need another 20,000. Because every time they give you a number, pretty much multiply it by maybe 5 times, maybe 25,000 soldiers. And we can see that whole excuse of all the soldiers coming home, saying that we're done in Afghanistan, that had nothing to do with being done in Afghanistan. That's just because Karzai wouldn't sign the bilateral security agreement, which meant the soldiers weren't allowed to stay in Afghanistan. So Obama took the opportunity to say, oh, I'm bringing the soldiers home. And as soon as the new president was elected and they signed the bilateral security agreement, guess what happened? Ooh, the Islamic State is coming back. It's getting worse there. We need to send more soldiers back. And this is what we're seeing today. We see out in Yemen, hundreds of thousands of Yemenis, they're protesting the Saudi-led military intervention into their country, and they're protesting, and there are many people that are suffering right now. The UN is saying about 2.1 million children are malnourished in this country, and this is all about the United States, Saudi Arabia, punishing Yemen for not wanting the puppet government. Remember, Yemen never attacked Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia and the United States attacked Yemen. We see out in Libya, the UK is following Russia right now. They're going to end the support of the UN-backed government, and they're going to switch it to General Haftar's government, the Tobruk government. And we can see already things are changing rapidly right now. Other countries are starting to follow Russia, and we're going to have to see how this plays out, because we know right now the U.S. is planning to bomb Libya. Troops are staying in Libya, and I wouldn't be surprised if more troops are being offloaded into Libya, because we're seeing that more troops are heading towards Iraq. More advisors, that's what they like to call them. And we can see that they're pushing more soldiers into this area. Now, we understand that the coalition forces, they bombed certain areas in Mosul. There were about 240 civilians killed, and of course the United States already blamed it on Iraq, and Iraq is saying, well, no, it wasn't our fault. The Islamic State left booby traps, and all these civilians got killed by the booby traps, which is absolutely ridiculous. They're just pointing fingers, trying to say we're not responsible for what happened here. We're seeing that U.S. troops, well, more are being brought into Syria, more are being brought into Iraq, and the whole thing is starting to heat up in the Middle East right now. And what we're seeing is things are starting to move forward for the big event. We know the attack on Raqqa is going to come in a couple of days right now, because they're surrounding it, getting prepared and ready for it. And as they move forward, we can see that things are really going to get heat up. We know that they're going to try to make their move in all these different countries to retake control, because we understand that things are rapidly falling apart in the Middle East. And as they do, and the people take control of their country, they're not going to sell the oil using the dollar, and the central bankers know this. This is why they're bringing in more and more troops, more and more assets, more and more military assets into this area, because they need to maintain control of this entire area, or that is the end. The whole system that we're in right now completely crashes, and it's blamed on the central bankers. So they're going to try to hold everything off until they can completely bring it down the way they want to bring it down, and blame it on another group, another country, and we can see they're headed in that direction. We see the murder out in Ukraine, where Poroshenko pointed the finger at Russia, saying, you just killed your MP that was in Ukraine. Well, we find out that the person who murdered Voronekov was indeed a Ukrainian ultra-nationalist, and he's the one who actually killed the Russian MP who was wanted in Russia. And it had nothing to do with Russia. Poroshenko was completely wrong again, and he was trying to get something going in that area. Now, we know that many of the countries around the world, they've been preparing and getting ready for civil unrest, and they've been ordering all these different types of equipment, military assets. We know there's a lot of tanks here in the United States, but there's this new system, and it's called the Bozena Riot Security System. And the riot system can handle virtually any duty when authorities need to put down an uprising. It is a remotely operated armored vehicle designed to deal with riots and mobs in the streets and urbanized areas. And the unmanned, yes, it's unmanned, well, it's covered in CCTV cameras, assuring full video coverage while the driver gets to enjoy the inner city rides from a comfortable, safe distance. And they can see everything that's going on, And you can see that the truck shield has 6 launching ports to fire guns or other rubber projectile launchers while keeping the heavily fortified shooters safe. Furthermore, should the truck's riot police passengers get stuck in an alleyway or something like that, the shield has a bulldozing capability, allowing authorities to directly engage with anyone that is in their way. And we can see right now they are continually creating these devices to deal with protest, riots, civil unrest. And we can see that when this economy continually breaks down, not just here in the United States, but in all across the world, people are going to be upset. People are going to riot. People are going to go after the government officials. And they understand this. This is why over the many, many years, they've been ramping up all this type of equipment. And remember, the deep state and the governments around the world, the central banks, they've been planning for this for quite a while because they knew when they had to reset the entire system, they're going to die. People are not going to be able to make it. They're not going to be able to get the food. I mean, look what's happening in Venezuela. It's going to happen around the world. We're already seeing it in many areas of the world, like Greece and Cyprus, and many of those places where it has really hit hard. This is going to spread to every single country when the entire system collapses. This is why they've been preparing and getting ready for this since 2008, because they knew then and there that this system, it cannot be sustained. And as we get closer and closer, we're going to see more of this type of equipment. So get prepared, get ready. The system is coming down. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.